Chris Natzke is an 8th degree black belt, master instructor and former national Taekwondo champion. As a life leadership coach, keynote speaker, and Amazon #1 best-selling author, he transforms lives through his unique brand of black belt leadership.
This is a Touchstone Publishers presentation, your trusted source of leadership knowledge.
All righty, good morning. And I know it might be not morning where you are, not really technically morning where I am, but it's always good morning. We'll never forget that. I'll just remind you, always morning because it's a good time of day. So, Chris, welcome on board. Thank you very much for joining us today. I really like to get to subject matter experts and just really let them dive in and discover things and help our leaders become better.
Excellent. Sounds great. Sounds great, Glenn. Great to be here.
Our announcer got us barely started, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as the intro said, I've been a career martial artist. Started at age 10, been studying and training martial arts since 1973. And in 99, I was the United States National Taekwondo champion. And then have changed my career or expanded my career into teaching leadership, doing life coaching, leadership coaching, and keynote speaking.
Perfect. I want to also just full disclosure, but it's full disclosure. Who cares? You and I were trained by a couple of the same people as far as the ability to do firewalks.
That is correct.
So that was a lot of fun. We discovered that 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, exactly. And we were together at Gary Barnes Boot Camp. Absolutely.
Yeah, Gary Barnes, and those of you who are not familiar, Gary Barnes does have a podcast with me that's online, but he did a wonderful 4-day boot camp.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. So we have a couple people from that boot camp who will be sharing their message throughout the course, but Chris is the first one.
All right.
So this idea of martial arts, I took Taekwondo for a while, and I realized that the more I took any type of martial arts, the more I learned to use my body.
Yeah.
What was your biggest lesson from your martial arts career?
Well, it's funny. It started so long ago. There have been several lessons. I think one of the first ones is, as a young boy training, is that I was going to get as much out of it as I put into it. Right. So it wasn't, I think I was a good athlete. I wasn't a great athlete when I started, but the more time and energy that I put into it, and particularly when it was backed by the passion of what I wanted to do. And then that lesson kind of transformed into all areas of my life. I was blessed to be an all-star football player in high school. I went to Division I college on a football scholarship. And again, it wasn't because I was a great athlete. It was because I was good, but I was able to really up-level my skills because of what I did in martial arts. So that was probably one of the first lessons I learned.
Well, okay, so let's dive into that a little bit. So it sounded like to me the lesson is discipline or passion for what you're doing. Would you agree with that? Would you coach me that way?
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people have passion for what they're doing, but they don't understand about this consistent effort that it takes to be good. Many people, there's a wonderful book called Mastery by a guy named Stuart Emery. You're familiar with it?
Yes.
He talks about the road to mastery, where most of the time that you're on your road to mastery, you're actually in a plateau. And that's where many people, I think, get bored with the process. And he says, before you actually make a leap upward, you actually generally take a little dip in your performance, and then you bounce up. And I guess for whatever reason, even at a very young age, I had a passion for it, and I was okay to just be in the process. And then as a result, started to see the benefits of those efforts later on.
I find that to be very true in the golf game. I mean, I used to be pretty good at it, and then I just started picking up my clubs again and trying to get the swing back in. You hit that plateau, then it drops down, and you get frustrated, but you got to just keep on.
That's right.
Hitting the clubs, and then it kind of goes back up. But isn't that the same case in the leadership realm? I mean, you have maybe somebody who's your direct report, and they get on a plateau.
Well, and leaders, we get in plateaus, right? And I think one of the more powerful things from a leadership perspective is to make sure that we not only communicate that to the people that we're leading, that's just a regular process of life, but also to have people see us move through our own plateaus, right? For me, there's nothing more impactful in leadership than by leading by example, and to show that, hey, sometimes as leaders, we're in our plateau, but we're staying the course. Because we know that if we stay persistent in our actions, good things are going to happen.
I thought you were going to say people need to see the leaders on that plateau so they appear to be authentic. But that's not where you went.
I would definitely agree with that. I think it's all about, I think one of the more important pieces of us as leaders is our ability to be vulnerable when it's appropriate. This whole thing where, we look to be invincible. I think that's at least for me, it was in my leadership positions is, trying to not show any kinks in the armor. And that is not sustainable, nor is it something that inspires people in the long run. But when we are able to show, hey, we're human, we're working through our own process, and this is what we did to overcome it, that's when you get some great leadership skills and people are willing to follow you in a much deeper and longer way.
Tell us, how does martial arts really shape a leader?
Well, the first and probably foremost thing I believe is that I've kind of already alluded to it. It's about this idea of we're always showing an example in this as well. So like, I'll give you an example. So I'm an 8th degree black belt, and for every one of my testings that I've ever gotten, for every advancement in rank, I've always chosen to do that in front of my students because I wanted them to see that I was willing to go through the same process that I was asking them to go through, right? And now that's going to vary in leaders in terms of our skill level, our age, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact of the matter is when people see us walking the talk, I think it's hugely important for us as leaders. I think it's also important for us to help people understand that we go through our own struggles, just like they're going through their struggles. And when we transcend those struggles and we move through them, to victories, if you will, that's what's on the other side. But that's all just part of being a leader, I think, is being able to show up and be that example.
Okay, I need to push back a little bit, and I'm going to do it a little bit different. If I'm to say a leader needs to be separated from his group, okay, because of the responsibilities. But it might just be a thing of definition. So define leadership for me.
Oh boy, that's an interesting question. I think that leadership is something first and foremost that starts from within. So our level of leadership starts with the way that we live our life, the way that we show up. And then what we're doing is we are using that as an example, and we are not so much pushing people there, but we're influencing them. I love what John Maxwell says. He says, if you're leading and no one's following, you're just going for a walk, right? So what we want to do is we want to be moving forward and making sure we're bringing people along with us. And the way we do that, I love this distinction in my leadership work. I think that many times in coaching and in leadership, we talk about this idea of holding people accountable, which I think is a very, very important concept. But I like to put a different twist on it. I like to say that we hold people capable. So what we do is we see a level of greatness in them. We communicate that with them. If they are engaged in ability of wanting to continue to move forward and expand those skills, then we hold them capable to that way of being.
To that level of performance, operation. Yeah. They're capable to get there. And that, you know what?
And we're doing that. I mean, if they give us permission to hold them capable, then we hold them capable. But for me, there's a distinction in that, in the way I frame that. Holding someone accountable, for me, has a different energy than holding someone capable.
It does have a much different energy, because that holding people capable, coach me if I'm getting this wrong, but that if you're holding people capable, they tend to reach for that.
Absolutely. You've already established a predetermined sense of high level of skill, of greatness, whatever you want to call it. And I believe people respond to that better. Now, are there times, as in positions as leaderships, that you need to tell someone something super straight, and maybe you need to really, you need really, come down? I don't want to say come down on them, but tell them it's straight, right? Don't sugarcoat anything. But I find that most people respond if, like, I think that when I was running, particularly my business, I think that my folks and then my staff members and my black belts, when I was holding them capable, they then were inspired to reach that level as well. because they
Right.
had this relationship with each other. And they also didn't want to disappoint me because they knew that I had their back. It was much different energy than if I was holding them in a condescending way, if you will.
So a leader lifts their people.
They do. They do. They lift their people. They're honest with their people. They lift their people. They tell them things that are straight, but they also help them understand a level of greatness that they can achieve. And as I said, they hold them capable to that. You know, I know that in my athletic career and in my martial arts career, it was the coaches that would be super straight with me. I'll give you a little analogy. I was just sharing this with some students the other day. It was my first year of playing college football at Northwestern University.
Okay.
And I was an inside linebacker. That was about 40 pounds ago. I'm a little bit lighter now. But and we were responsible for when the offense came up that we had to call the defensive fronts. So we had to tell the defensive lineman what position to go into. And I was overwhelmed as a freshman, and I made the wrong call. I made the mistake on the play. The running back popped for a long run, et cetera. And so I totally messed up the play. And my coach let me know it, right? So he was on me. He was on me, man. And without even thinking about it, I gave him what I would call stink eye, right? I like now, it wasn't really because I was mad at him. I was really mad at myself.
Yes, right? Yeah.
But I glared at him, and he came over to me, and he like put his arm around me, and he said, "Natzke, I need to tell you something. When I stop yelling at you, that's when you need to start worrying, because then I don't care anymore." And that was a game changer for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because now it was like, yeah, he was communicating to me in that way because he cared. And I say that to my martial arts students all the time. You know, if I'm critiquing you, if I'm giving you feedback, and you might be taken aback by it, it's because I care, right? Because I see that level of greatness in you that I want you to aspire to.
So as a leader, if I laid that out, and to all my direct reports, yeah, I'm going to be honest with you because you're capable of this. That's right. So I'm going to give you the feedback when it's necessary, because I know you're capable of doing my job, the next job up.
That's right.
So therefore, I'm going to hold you to it. So that's, you got it behind you, breakthrough thinking right there, breaking through.
No doubt. You know, in martial arts, when we're teaching, we have a concept, and I know it goes by different names in different ways. We call it praise, correct praise. PCP. So when you see a student, for instance, that is doing a technique, you praise the effort, right? They're doing the technique. Then you correct what they need to improve upon, and then you praise the correction. And I think the same thing can hold true in leadership. You know, praise a positive effort, praise something positive about the effort, make the corrections, don't sly away from them, and then encourage them when those corrections are made. I think people respond more to that in the long term than they do when it's constant negative feedback. That's just my experience.
Oh, yeah. They will respond better to that than constant negative feedback. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Because once you defeat that, it prevents, I think, from people going that next step.
Absolutely.
I saw it, and I mentioned it real quick, your book, Breaking Through. Yes. I hear about that.
Yeah. Well, you got to experience it, I believe, Glenn, when we did our board breaking experience with Gary Barnes. And so, and this actually originated with the Gary Barnes boot camp. I have to give some kudos to Gary. Probably about 7 years ago, I would put together a board breaking experience for his boot camp. So I put it together, and it went really well the very first time. And these people started coming up to me afterwards and said, "So, is this what you do? Do you go around the country and go to corporations and teach this board breaking thing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think that's what we do now."
I'll do that now. Yeah.
now. And so I have been, and I've been really blessed to be able to do that. But what came from that experience is I would observe these people, and you probably did as well, have this really peak experience, right? Breaking through their limiting beliefs, because they actually write them on the board, their limiting beliefs, what they're going to break through. And I'd see this really amazing breakthrough, if you will. And then I'd maybe see them later, see them in another boot camp, or see them around Denver or whatever. And I'd ask them if they actually had their breakthrough, the thing that they wanted to accomplish that was on the other side of that board. And I have to admit, sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. So I thought, what could I do? If I was coaching them directly, I know exactly the steps I take them through. If they told me they wanted to create something in their life, and I said, why don't I make that into a book? And so that's what I did. And so I have 3 key strategies to go through. There's sub segments in that, but it's to take someone from the point of creating the breakthrough in their mind, the vision they want to have, all the way through to completion.
Those 3 key strategies, is that the 3 C's?
Yeah, the 3 C's, exactly. It's exactly. So the first one is to create a vision for what you want. You know, you want to make sure you clarify that vision. You want to make sure it's crystal clear in your mind. And I learned that as a competitive athlete. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I stepped in the ring, I would use the same techniques and win with the same techniques that I had visualized before I ever stepped in the ring.
Right.
So the first one is to clarify your vision. The next one is to create your plan. And this might sound like a no-brainer, but many people miss this step. They're very good about, you know, creating the big picture in their mind, but they don't really understand what are the things that they can do. How do you break it down? Sometimes people are super overwhelmed because there's so much to do, but it's like how you eat an elephant, right? You break it down and then you take consistent steps. And that's the third one, which is taking consistent action. Once you've created the plan, then how do you incorporate it into your daily life? Not just an event that you do once a month, but each and every day, are you making progress against that breakthrough? And it's been my experience when you do that, those powerful habits, they don't add up, they compound, right? Because you start building momentum toward the goal.
We do. I want to pull that apart because this ideal, the vision, purposeful vision, and conscious persistence.
Yeah.
I'm a little lost. Give that to me.
Oh, beautiful. Well, you know, the purposeful vision, I believe that all of us are born with a vision for who we want to be and what we want to create in our lives. And in fact, some people will come to me and they're not really clear about it. And then we start looking at their life and the times where they were the most expansive, they felt the very best. Those very things that they were doing are really part of their purpose, whether it was in, you know, regardless of what type of professional setting it was in. So it's about getting clear in that vision. Like when I opened up my martial arts school, when I left corporate back in 1995, I could literally tell you what it looked like, what it tasted like, what it would smell like. That was how powerful that vision. But then the idea is anytime we have a big vision, we're going to come up with obstacles. In fact, I would argue that the bigger the vision, the bigger the obstacles are going to be. And so that constant persistence is about showing up each and every day. And it goes back to that, what are the small things we can do on a daily basis to work toward that? And I'm a big Oprah Winfrey fan, right? And I remember hearing her give a keynote talk one time about always just looking to the next right thing. And then what's the next right thing after that? And then the next right thing. Many of us will hold back because we don't have the full plan. And all it is about having that first step. And my experience is the next step shows up and then the next one does as well.
I want to dive in that a little bit because I think when we're teaching goal setting, I think too many people spend too much time laying out the plan, being super analytical about it. And I think I can see it both ways, where they don't have a vision or they do have a vision and they don't have the plan laid out. But a lot of people they won't take the step forward until they have every step put in. You're saying first step, let the next step show up.
Yeah. You know, I know that I've dealt with this myself in my life, where it's like everything needs to be perfect before I move. And then I found out that I could sit for months, if not years, not doing anything. So sometimes it's okay to say, fire, ready, aim. You know, it's okay. Yeah, I think that being super meticulous with our plans can actually get us caught in that analysis paralysis. I think having a good idea with basic steps that we're going to take. But then also, one of my favorite quotes of 2020, and I've been sharing this a lot in the interviews I've been doing lately, is to be stubborn in our goals, but flexible in our methods.
Yeah, that's a good quote.
Our goals. And I mean, if 2020 and COVID taught us anything, is we had to be stubborn in our goals, be intentional where we want to go. But man, we're going to have to be flexible because things aren't showing up the way they used to.
Yeah, I have to second that. One of the most powerful women I've ever met in my life one day said, the way I normally do things are not going to work.
Yeah.
I got to be flexible. The way I normally do things will cause 355 people to die. I have to be flexible.
Wow.
Do something different.
Amen to that. Amen. Well, in fact, it's interesting because, I'll go back to my expertise, martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
Flexibility is a huge piece, not only from just how pliable our body is, for instance, our legs, but when you're in the middle of a sparring match, you may have a game plan. And maybe what happens if your best technique isn't working that day?
Yeah.
Trust me. How are you going to adjust? And the people that go from good to great are the people that are able to adjust and be flexible in their method.
See, I would, yeah. So during my brief career, it was like, get your 3 steps, master those 3 steps, get that 3-step process done. Perfect.
Right.
Don't worry about anything else.
Yeah.
But then
I think that if you practice that to that level where you have that level of mastery with those basics, because let's face it, that's really what a black belt means, Glenn. It's to be a master of the basics. That's really what it means. When you have that mastership of basics, now you can be flexible from there. I'm going to quote Bruce Lee here. See, what Bruce Lee said is before he started martial arts, a kick was just a kick and a punch was just a punch. And then he started training in martial arts, and a kick wasn't really a kick anymore, and a punch wasn't really a punch. Then he mastered martial arts, and a kick was just a kick, and a punch was just a punch. So, right? So when we have that basis of expertise, of mastery, now it does allow us to be more flexible and fluid.
This is the power of, for me, this podcast, because I get a different twist on things that help me think through things.
Yeah.
Essential leadership skills. Get the mastery of that. So you're mastering communication, you're mastering leadership skills, you're mastering leadership intelligence. But what you just taught me is that once you get past that, and once you go from this skill, not really to skill, you're ready for the next advanced level.
Right.
And you have to have that advanced level to be flexible.
Exactly. And, there's a whole difference between, mastery of the topic and then the execution of it. It's like, going back to my football roots, you can have a game plan going into a game, and then all of a sudden something goes awry. They show you a defensive front you didn't see before, or whatever. Now, if you don't have your basic fundamentals of football execution, really solid, you're not able to make those adjustments. But if your basics are solid, now you can make adjustments and changes to the game plan.
So I want to take it with the sports analogy and then into the leadership analogy a little bit. But I think about Troy Calhoun down in Air Force Academy. I remember one of his planes said, "We're so sick of running this 33 belly." And for those of you who don't know football, it doesn't matter. It's just one particular play and just boring beyond everything.
That's right.
But that's the essential skill.
That's right.
And that's what we're saying, a leader, let's follow the essential skills so you know where you're supposed to be, you know how it's supposed to feel. But in the game, you're going to adjust and change the play and do everything else. That's powerful. Do you agree with that kind of?
I absolutely agree with it. I think it's important in not only leadership, but it's important in life. And it's always this fine line, isn't it? Because there are certain activities that we have and skills that we develop that get us to a point. But if we have blinders on in terms of having fluidity within it, then they can almost become a detriment. But if we allow ourselves to be fluid and use that as our basis, they become strengths for us.
So that brings up another strength then, because understanding people is one thing, but understanding the person, that becomes a whole other thing. And if you're a leader, that person may require a different foot than the other person does, a different conversation than the other person does, because you have to be flexible. Yeah. But the point still is you still have to coach and hold that person accountable.
That's right. It's a commonality and an umbrella standpoint, as you said, holding them accountable or capable, but then also knowing how to meet their individual needs or their individual personalities. I'll even go back to teaching martial arts.
Mhm.
There's a very specific curriculum that I would teach someone going from white belt to black belts, let's say.
Okay.
Now, some people are going to have skills that will be very easy for them to go through that curriculum. Others won't. I have to be able as an instructor to adjust to make those techniques practical and usable for the person based on their physiology of their body, their mental makeup. I mean, all sorts of factors. I have to be able to be flexible enough to make it adaptable for them.
So when you're doing that and you're being flexible enough, I mean, you have the curriculum, but you're being flexible enough with that person. Is that what you mean when you talk about the exceptional experience? Are you creating the exceptional experience for that student or for that employee? And is there another part of that I'm missing?
Well, I think it definitely is that, because you see, when people will respond when they take ownership of a concept, right? Employees will, when they take ownership. When I owned my own business and I had employees, when they would take ownership of the school, so to speak, ownership in terms of quotation marks, but of what we were doing, I had a group that would run through a wall for me, right? If they were just doing something because I told them to do it without a real ownership to it and embodying and embracing that, two very, very different things. So when we're adapting things to people, we still have our clear vision for our organization and where we're going, but we enroll people in that, and then we show them how their unique skill set can contribute to that. People now buy into what we're doing as leaders, and that's where that synergy, then it expands and multiplies, right? Because you have people totally on focus, knowing that they're utilizing their skills to the highest degree. Same thing with a martial arts student. If I can adapt a technique that they can become really proficient in it, they buy into it.
Okay, that makes sense. They will buy in it. I do wonder, though, maybe times have changed. I mean, they'll buy in it, but that creates an exceptional experience for them. Times have changed to the point that if you're worried or concerned about productivity and accountability, you still need to create that exceptional experience.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that just came to me is when I learned as a leader, as a business owner, is I could do that, but still it was my responsibility to inspect what I expected.
Okay.
And one of the things I learned as a small business owner, I trained my people, and quite honestly, I would have put my staff up against anyone in the country as a martial arts school staff. They were fantastic instructors, great at sales, great at, all the elements of the school. And the challenge that I got is they got really good. So I kind of let them be on their own. And then I came in one time and I saw many of the basic things that got us to where we were started getting soft, right? And that's human nature. I mean, we're all that way as human beings. But then, initially I was pretty upset with them, but then I had to say, okay, who's really accountable for this? It's me. I'm the leader of this organization. And that's where I got to slow down and say, where do I have opportunities to inspect what I'm expecting? Where am I placing priorities? Because really it's falling on me as the leader. I have to be able to be responsible for that at the very end of the day.
So when you're inspecting what you expect and taking responsibility, is that when you talk about the champion's mindset?
Definitely. See, because the champion's mindset is all about personal accountability, right? We have this thing inside of us, I believe, the seed of greatness for us. But it first comes with us being able to recognize and accept it in ourselves. Then it comes with, okay, now, if I accept that in myself, what are the actions I'm going to take in order to best utilize these gifts that we have? And that mind of a champion, again, isn't just about an event here, an event there. It's about a consistent way of showing up in our lives. And it's also then a consistent way of leading our organizations from a leadership standpoint. The consistency. I mean, I think consistency in a leader is one of the strongest attributes, as well as consistency if you're in a marriage, consistency if you're a parent. I was sharing with you, I went with my son today to watch the Denver Broncos practice.
Right.
And I was observing a man with his young son who was probably about 7 years old, and he was kind of misbehaving. And the dad was saying, listen, if you don't shape up, we're out of here. And if you don't do this, and he was making these threats, right? I say threats.
Not really.
And I thought to myself, what if the kid acts up later on and you don't follow through with what you said? And what if that's the way you're parenting all the time, where you're making these threats, but then you're not following through? What happens over time is you lose credibility. That lack of consistency in your messaging and in the way you're going forward is going to impact your relationship with your son. This was all rolling in my head when I'm
right.
In seconds, but I think it's so important for us as leaders. We need to be consistent with our message and also what we're expecting from people, so that because when people, I think, are in an environment where they know, basically what's expected of them, it actually gives them freedom, right? When they know the things that are strong and the anchors within the organization, then allows them to be freer, more creative. And I think it just builds an organization more powerful.
Builds a great organization. So just that champion mindset of, it's me. I'm the one that's accountable.
That's right.
And I inspect all that. Wow, right. I have to really think that's a good step. A couple other questions. I do want to be respectful of everybody's time here, especially yours, but I need for you to tell us about this. What is the way of success? Now, before you even begin to answer that question, I got to just share with everybody about the breakthrough that you did at this boot camp. Mm-hmm. I no longer teach those type of things. I, for some reason, I just don't. So, however, had I still in the process, I would have stepped out. I would have retired on that day, because your process was so crisp and clear.
Thank you.
I think everybody, even those who didn't break it the first time they went through it, by the second or third time, you had their mind set right. Mm-hmm. They can break through that. So if anybody ever gets a chance to go through that workshop with you, they should. But here's my question. The way of success, the way you got these people to break through this board, okay, tell us about the way you did that. I mean, how did you set that up so successfully?
Yeah.
You're talking about women, the oldest one was 80 years old?
Yeah.
Go through hers?
And I think at this last conference, we had someone who was 10 years old and with her hand, which was amazing for the first time. I mean, I usually don't have kids that young breaking with their hands. They usually do their feet. But I thank you so much for saying that, Glenn. And well, I've obviously been doing this a while. I've been doing martial arts for a long time and giving people that process. But I think what's super important is and this works in leadership as well, is setting people up for success. And so if what you most likely observed is there was a process for me to get them to break that board. And it started with, and hopefully what you also saw is it was much more than just physical for them. We integrated it. We integrated with a breakthrough that they wanted to have in their own life, talked about maybe some of the negative messages they were putting in their own minds on a continual basis. And then we gave them some practical application practicing on pads before, but that whole idea was about building confidence. And then when they had that experience, again, it wasn't just physical. I've often said that if I wanted to teach them to break a piece of wood, it would probably take me about 10 minutes. I could teach the basic techniques. Right. But when there was meaning to it, when there was a why behind it, you recall one of the questions when I talked to them about their breakthrough is, why is that important to you? What's the big why for you? And you can see people's minds begin to kind of shift in. There was one man in there in the group, and he's a friend of mine, and I asked him to share. He had lost 70 pounds since the last time that I saw him.
Wow.
And he wanted to continue on this path of health and wellness. But I asked him in front of the group, I said, what was your big why for starting on your journey to release all that weight? And he said, I wanted to be alive.
Strong why.
Be alive, man. Talk about a why, right? And so now there's an emotional component to this, right? There's a tie-in emotionally to the physicality of it. There's a passion behind it. And then when you put it together, hopefully with constructive instruction on how to do it physically, they all tie together. And and there are people that don't break it the first time. And quite honestly, I'm okay with that, because what it shows is when they're up there is puts everyone else in a whole different plane of noticing and going, wow, sometimes life doesn't happen just the way I wanted to unfold. You know, I didn't share this at the event you were at, but I shared in the book Breaking Through. Several years ago, I was doing that boot camp for Gary, and there was a woman who it took her at least a dozen times to break that board.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know this going into it, but she had multiple sclerosis. So as I watched her, the body was moving fine, but she wasn't able to focus on hitting the board in the center. So I was holding the board. There were 50 to 60 people who had already done their board break, and now it's just she and I. And she does 2 attempts and she misses again. So I leaned over to her and I said, hey, I'm here all weekend. If you don't break it on this next one, we'll just get together. I'll take you off to the side. We'll make sure this thing gets broken this weekend. So she centers herself. She takes her practices, and all of a sudden, bam, crack, she goes through the board. Glenn, the whole place standing over. Yeah. She jumped in my arms, tears flowing down her cheeks. Mm-hmm. And that was a gift to everybody, because they got to see was someone show this tremendous courage and say, man, sometimes life gives me that hand and I need to be able to break through that as well.
When we take that out of the workshop room and apply that into the business room, business life, I mean, that metaphor is perfect. Yeah. You have issues that mostly are in your mind that's preventing you from doing the best and taking ownership of the situation.
Right.
And that's breaking the wood.
That's right.
So once you get that champion's mindset in, I'm accountable for this. And actually, so I remember one time they had written on a piece of paper and put that piece of paper around the board. And one lady, the paper didn't tear, the board broke.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, that was a metaphor for I'm not getting past my limits.
Yeah,
I can break the board.
Yeah,
well, you can do everything. So, I mean, the paper never really broke, but it would tear.
Sure, I get it.
It didn't tear.
There's so many beautiful metaphors with that, right? And it's so interesting when I do that board breaking experience. I think that the worst part for people is not when they're up in front of the room doing what I call their proclamation, you know, what their name is and the board, you know, the breakthrough and the limiting belief. It's when they're standing in line waiting to come up. That's the worst part. And I observe people. And now this is a total generality. I think that in many cases, many women are a little bit concerned that they don't have the strength to break it, right? Which is reasonable. And I think a bunch of guys are going, oh my God, I just saw a bunch of women break it. And if I don't, I'm going to look weak. I mean, all these things are going on in their mind. But it does translate to our lives in leadership, doesn't it? Because most of the time, the worst part that we have is being in our worry before an event. And once we lean into it and we take action, a lot of all that starts to fade away. The worst part, I think, was Mark Twain said, I've gone through a lot of terrible things in my life, some of those that actually happened, right?
Yeah, a few of those actually happened,
we're all in his head. And I can totally relate to that because I've definitely done that myself.
Well, and that's just it, though. I will add one more piece to it just for the leadership training of it. Okay, so the worst part is living all this in your head before you get started. But when you have the skills, like you laid out, okay, here's your stance. Mm-hmm. Here's your target. Here's what you're doing. When you lay out the skills and you have that champion's mindset, using the skills, the fundamentals, you can easily find the extra push to go through it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it goes back to our whole discussion on basics and fundamentals of leadership, fundamentals in martial arts, fundamentals in whatever. And like I said before, we say a black belt is nothing more than a master of the basics. Yes, so, you know, and the same thing in leadership. It's the same way when we run our own businesses. It's the same way when we're in relationships. There are certain things that if we hold true to those basic protocols that work, 9 times out of 10, we're going to be just fine. But it's where I think we can get distracted and off of our game, you know, present company included, right? Because had that happen as well, and where we kind of get off. But man, when we reel it in and go, man, where I need to get back down and do my basics again, that's usually exactly where it originates from.
Yeah, I tend to super agree with that for a lot of different reasons. Phil Simms, when he won that last championship thing, he said, you know what it was? I had to remember to be the basics. See the ball, hit the ball.
That's right.
Set my plan up before, and when I was weak at some of his final 18, so I was messing up the first 3 or 4.
Yeah.
My brother, who was my caddy, came back and said, Phil, decide what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
See the ball and hit the ball there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And that's what
I remember that lesson was taught to me when I started martial arts back in 1973. My first instructor said, you know, it's all about your basics. And he did this analogy. I still remember it. I was 10 years old. And he said, if you don't have strong basics, it's like building a house on sand. And the first time a storm comes, it's going to fall. But if you built it on a strong foundation, it can withstand anything from a climate. So that's always been something that was ingrained in me very young. And I used it in so many aspects of my life, not just martial arts.
Yeah. And that's just amazing. That's just amazing. Because I know sometimes people listen to talks like this and they say, well, that's woo-woo. We don't need that. I'm not kidding you. You want to see a transformation?
Yeah.
Have people do this.
Yeah.
It's just an absolutely amazing thing. I want to ask you, because I know I've gone past the time I told you we were going to be there, but I want to ask you, you said it, and I want to know, what are the questions I should be asking myself?
Okay. So what are the questions I should be asking myself?
Yeah, so the questions we should ask ourselves.
Yeah. You know, I'm just going to go back. I actually did a blog. I did not know you're going to ask this question, Glenn.
I didn't tell you I was either.
I blogged this week. I have what I call the Mind of a Champion tip of the week. And my blog this week was entitled, How Do I Do It versus Can I Do It? How do I do it versus can I do it? So when challenges arise, it's a natural reaction for us to say, can I do this? Do I have what it takes? Do I have the strength? Do I have the skills? Do I have whatever? Mm-hmm. And that's a very natural question. However, I think the power comes in asking ourselves, how do I do it? Because when you ask yourself, how do I do it? Your mind goes into creative problem solving. And then it goes to that first step you can take. And then the next step, and then the next step. So I think that would, again, not knowing you're going to ask that question, but that would be how I would answer it. Not can I do it, but how do I do it?
How to do it. How to get it accomplished. How to get it accomplished. Your book is on Amazon, correct?
Yes, it is on Amazon.
Breaking Through. And that's the one that's the number one. It was
a number one bestseller when it came out. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of help from friends and people that, in my community, et cetera, that helped to go number one. But it's right over my shoulder here. And also, if people want an introductory chapter to it, they can go to my website and actually download an introductory chapter to it.
Yeah, let me throw that website up there real quick so everybody can see it again. But what I want to ask you about, also on your website, you can go get the 3 winning strategies to create breakthroughs.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah,
go
ahead and download it.
Give us a good feel for that. So people can, because I have the phone number there and the website's rolling through, but give us a good feel for that.
Well, it kind of goes back to those three keys that I talked about before, right? Mm-hmm. The 3 C's, if you will. So the first one is to clarify your vision. And one of the things that I do, and I write about this in the book, when I work with clients from a life coaching standpoint, sometimes people aren't clear about what they want. They're super clear about what they don't want.
Most people are.
Most people are, right? So what I do is in the book, I take them through a process of how to, get clear on what you don't want then. And then how can you transform what you don't want into what you do want? Right? So that's the first C. The first C is getting, clarifying your vision. Then number 2 is that creating your plan. And it goes along with not only what needs to happen in the aggregate, but how do you break that down? What are the smaller things that you can do on a daily and weekly basis? And also, where's a person that could potentially hold you capable? Whether it's a friend, whether it's a business partner, whether it's a coach, like in the work that I do, but where can you have someone hold you that? And then what are the things you can do on from a consistent effort, right? Consistent action. And not only make that where you're taking the action, but also taking time to evaluate what's happening. So each week, are you doing a place where you're looking at the things that work, the things that didn't work, et cetera? Because I've often been told by my airline pilot friends that a plane that's in the air is off course 99% of the time.
Yes.
So if we have an intention and we're doing the steps and we're just working, but we're never taking time to evaluate where we are, what we've created, and where we want to go, we could be totally off course. And we're just busy working, doing, but we're not really strategic about where we want to go. So those are the three that you can get from that kind of as a top line. But I think that applies to anything, whether it's a huge breakthrough you want to have in your life, if it's how you want to communicate with someone, you want to run a business, if you want to release a bunch of weight, all those things that you want to do have those same three elements to them.
I have a follow-up question for that, but a comment first. I noticed that you're still using capable.
Yes.
Who can keep me capable, or keep me not accountable, but who can help me be capable?
That's right.
So I love that. The follow-up question that I had for that, though, another kind of this. When you go in, now you didn't have the full day, so I don't know how long your keynotes or your workshops are, but when you go in to deliver those to a company, what are the top 2-3 things that you want to make sure, other than breaking the board, to get? Is it the 3 C's?
The 3 C's are definitely part of that. But what I also want to do when I go and I work with customers, I really want to know what are some of the greatest challenges that they have. Because I have my message that I want to give, but I think it's important for me to individualize that to any customer, any client that I'm working with. So what are the specific things? Are there certain challenges that they're having as an organization, as a business, as a culture? And more times than not, the message that I'm going to be sharing has elements that can support that. But I want to make sure, I'll give you this as a small example.
Okay, great.
When I was doing martial arts and I had a bunch of children students, I did a lot of coaching of the kids that the parents would want me, their kid was having a problem in school, so to speak, right?
Right.
So I'd come in and I'd coach the kid and I'd put him on an action plan. And then I'd bring the parent in and I'd tell them what our next steps were. And the parent would look at me and say, how did you get him to agree to that? I've been asking him to do that for 6 months. And I said, well, first of all, I wasn't you, right? Because they're the true not.
Yeah.
But number two is sometimes just hearing the message from a different messenger in a different way can help really bring everything together. And so I love working with clients, finding out what their biggest challenges are, seeing how my work can integrate with them to get them the results that they really want.
Good deal. Last question for you.
Yes, sir.
What question should I have asked you that I did not ask you?
Wow, what question could you have asked me that you didn't ask me? Maybe the question that has been, what has been the most challenging time in my life? And as a leader, and if I may expand on that rather than just leave everybody in the hook, but the most challenging part in my life is when I left corporate America to open up my own business. And the interesting thing about that is that I had so many unknowns. And even though I'd been successful in the corporate arena and been successful in martial arts, but when I went off to do my own work and have my own school, there was something, because it was unknown, I really began to freeze. I froze so badly, I was really impacted heavily through panic attacks. And so I had to pull myself up off the floor. Mr. Big Tough Karate Guy, right? Was basically paralyzed by that. And I guess the message I would leave with people is that when you're up against it, it's number one, it's always okay to ask for help, right? Many times as leaders in particular, we think we got to handle this all by ourselves. I got to be the tough man or the tough woman. A sign of strength and leadership, I think, is asking for help when we need it. And also knowing it's never as bad as we think it is, right?
You're right.
Always something that can be done. Had I have known those two lessons, that time in my life, I think I would have navigated a little bit differently. But that's what I'd like to share with you.
So that's authentic, right? That was a problem, and you dealt with it, and then you know better now.
Yeah.
Question came in while you were talking. They want to know, I think it was a Facebook question, so we don't have who it was, but they want to know what kind of goes, I guess you can explain to them, what's on the backside of you said the substance on the backside of the board. I know what it is, but you want the breakthroughs. Would you
very good.
about that?
When we do the board breaking experience, what we do is we have them write on side A of the board the breakthrough that they want to have. Very specific. If it's a amount of weight they want to release, if it's the amount of money they want to generate their business, a relationship they want to heal, very, very specific. That's on side A of the board. On side B of the board, they write down the limiting belief or limiting beliefs that have held them back from achieving that in their life. And sometimes it's just one thing. It might be as simple as I'm not good enough, right? Or I'm always too busy, or I'm not smart enough, whatever that is. And I always tell people that sometimes people come up and there's 20 of them on the back of the board, but I'm saying really just choose one, because generally speaking, that one is oftentimes at the very, very genesis of all the others, right? And then when they break the board, they're looking at that limiting belief. When they're striking the board, that's what they're striking and breaking through.
And striking that out of the way.
That's right. Exactly.
Great. Thank you. Chris, I cannot begin to tell you how much I look forward to this when we met and talked, and after watching people just break through these boards, like, we had an old lady. I actually got my parents to break through boards once.
Nice.
So it's a powerful step. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're thinking about something that's going to be useful, powerful, and your folks are going to love you for it, you've been seeing Chris's website, his name, I'm going to highly suggest you get a hold of him and go from there. I'm going to just super suggest that happens for you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Glenn. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, absolutely, totally my pleasure. Greatly appreciate you taking the time. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, you got his information there.
Thank you for connecting with us here at Touchstone Publishers. Please join our group Essential Leadership Skills and share your leadership knowledge with us all.